Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fintech Combine. I am your host, Kris Kovacs, and this is the series where we talk with and sometimes about community-based institutions, their digital and business transformation projects, and we meet the innovators, entrepreneurs, and fintechs that make it all possible. On this episode, we're speaking with Kara Oppenheimer, the CEO and co-founder of Goodbye, about how they're helping credit unions attract business members and share the benefits of that membership with all of the other members in their community. So if you're ready, let's suit up and get out on the field. Kara, thank you very much for joining us. I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and about your firm, Goodbye?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am CEO and co-founder here at Goodbye. I'll share a little bit about this probably as we start discussing, but myself and my co-founder, Carrie, we founded Goodbye about 4 years ago with the intention of making it efficient and easy to shop from small businesses all over this country. Really thinking about redistributing opportunity into the hands of small business owners in local economies, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, American-made businesses, in a time when there was sort of an atmosphere of shopping from mega retailers didn't feel good to folks anymore, and really gained a ton of momentum going direct to consumer with our initial idea. Where that all stemmed from, because I think it's super important to who I am and my story. So I have 18 years as a marketer running creative teams at ad agencies before I started this company. And what made me leave my job is that my parents were small business owners. And much like many other small business owners in the pandemic, they lost their business. And I didn't realize how central it was to my being until it happened. And then until I watched Amazon boxes showing up at my door after they had lost their business and thinking about how can we actually make an impact inside of communities and stop this nonsense of 70% of all retail spend happening with mega retailers. So, I get really passionate about the subject, but before we even get to how we got to fintechs, I think a really important thing for you to understand about, me and us is that motivational story behind who we are. And really, for me, it was all about uplifting small business, creating opportunity, and developing those relationships, if that makes sense. So you want to hear a little bit about Goodbye, I'm assuming, too, as it stands now.
Absolutely. Tell us about Goodbye today.
So what happened was we started going direct to consumer. So for many years, we had 200,000 monthly active users on Goodbye, shopping from small businesses across the country, had redirected $6 million away from mega retailers into the hands of local small business owners. And I think most importantly, we really quickly onboarded 1,500 small businesses into our program in under a year with one person sales team. And so, literally a one person sales team, all night, messaging folks, but we got them on board and we really quickly realized that the efficacy in Goodbye was in this channel, this sort of commercial network we were creating and the ability to deepen relationships and give small businesses what they needed. And so what happened was that took us very quickly to where there was opportunity, to reach small businesses, deepen relationships with the banks, with the credit unions. And so we got inbound from a large bank, a really large international bank, and they wanted to white label Goodbye. And they said, can we make you part of our rewards? We want to make it easy to shop from small businesses and give incentives to our people that hold our credit cards, I want to say members, but it's obviously not members when you're talking about a bank. And then what happened was that led us to, we still talk to that bank, but it was not what we wanted to do. But we ended up talking to a lot of credit unions and very quickly realizing that people who want to help other people in their community, who want to shop from small businesses, were actually credit union members. And then very quickly realized thereafter that we could solve the problem for credit unions where they're not finding a lot of, growth on the small business side and that's a huge problem right now for credit unions. Their individual member base is exciting, but the growth potential there is waning for a multitude of reasons that we can unpack. But for us, we're taking our special sauce and essentially saying, let us help you acquire small business through this channel. And I'll share what it looks like and deepen those relationships and build, community commerce, right? A network effect in your community. So what we do at Goodbye right now is we essentially have created this solution that is a CU branded marketplace that sits in app, outside of app, desktop. We can talk about that too, that facilitates commerce between the individual member base and the small businesses in their community, and essentially drives what small businesses want most, which is access to their community members. And credit unions are uniquely positioned to do that.
What kind of impact can that kind of relationship between a credit union and a community have when you're really helping facilitate and make those connections?
Yeah, I think the way that I like to think about it, I almost want to bring up a thesis slide that I have, and I can share it with you to put a link in the show notes.
Sure.
But essentially, the way that I view it is that the impact is triple fold of what exists currently. So right now, you've got this chasm, right? You've got individual members in a community, typically in a charter, in a mission, right? In an area that a credit union holds, whether it's 40,000 members or it's 500,000 members. They sit most typically in a region or an expanded region, and you've got them sitting there and they transact in their communities, right? 70% of their transactions are happening within 2 miles in their community every day. And yeah, that can be Amazon and Target, but it can also be your local coffee shop, your date night restaurant, your tire shop, your accountant, right? Your family owned business next door. And so when I think about impact, I think about closing that chasm between the member base and the small business base and driving those small businesses to there. So essentially that commerce is being enabled and empowered and sort of not necessarily, it's sort of taken away from their mega retailer shopping when you're incentivizing them to come into their community, right? Let's say a credit union offers Goodbye as a community access pass to their member base, saying you get discounts at all your local community because of our credit union. You're creating this network effect. So you're creating impact in that you're creating impact for the small business because you're driving commerce to them at no cost if they move their balance over to you, right? So you're driving that commerce to them, huge impact, huge relationship connection because no bank is doing that for them. You're driving value to the member base because it's where they transact most. And then you're driving value because the credit union is then at the center of all of this instead of them not owning those, relationships with those SMBs in the traditional model of, let's give our member a perk to Crunch Fitness, which is great. It doesn't do anything for the credit union owning that relationship with that small business. And so the value for the credit union comes in the deepening relationship, but also from a revenue standpoint, because they're driving deposit growth. So to be able to be a part of this marketplace, your small business has to open a balance with this credit union. So you're driving deposit growth, and then you're driving interchange income, right? The automatic revenue that comes through the commerce. It's required to use the financial institution card. So you're driving
which means you also could generate more members.
Yeah. So what that brings up for me is this network effect. And I sort of I cued to it before, but my dream state, the thinking that we have at Goodbye is that when this does take off in a community and you have a member, an individual member, let's say me, I go out with my girlfriends at least once a month, right? You go to that restaurant and at the end of your meal, you go to pay and you say, no, let me get it. You can Venmo me because I get 10% off here because my credit union gives me that discount. And so that moment is poignant, right? That marketing, that free marketing moment. And the same thing, think about walking up to a till at a small business and saying to them, hey, do you take the ICCU Community Access Pass? And they're like, no, what is that? And then you tell them, or they look it up and they hear it enough times that small business is then driven to inbound at the credit union. So our hope is to sort of mobilize the community effect that credit unions have always wanted to have and have to some regard, but there's so much more potential there to sort of create that flywheel through that commerce, through that interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's that. And that can be powerful, right? Especially, in some communities where you may have a credit union, right, who really is very prominent in that area. That can have a lot of reach to be able to go in and talk to both members and to potential businesses as well. Tell me a little bit about making the decision to leave the safe place that you knew about kind of working in ad agencies to start a company. Like, just What does that decision feel like? You said you were inspired by, your
Yeah.
parents' loss of their business,
Yep.
but that might have disincentivized you to do it because you just saw this happen, right? So, talk a little bit about leaving the relative safety of a corporate job for a startup.
Okay, so we're moving into therapy now. I'll share. I could talk about this for a very long time because I'd like to say it was the easiest decision I ever made. What I would say, but it wasn't at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It is a very hard thing to go through, especially with the level of financial stability that I
Mm-hmm.
had. I mean, transparently, I worked very hard. I grew up in Canada. I went to college in Canada, always said, I was going to move to the US and make a difference. And I was going to move
Mm-hmm.
to LA and do big things. And I made it happen for myself. And I spent 18 years, working my way up. And I worked with some really big companies,
Mm-hmm.
financial institutions on the other side of the
Mm-hmm.
equation, and the Cisco's and the Porsches. And it was quote unquote sexy,
Mm-hmm.
but it was really draining and exhausting in the sense that I would bring what I thought was my sort of superpower to the table every single day, which is sort of trying to solve complex social problems with creativity for brands. So it sounds big, but when I worked with Lego, I was like, what can we do to help kids learn in a more meaningful way? And
Mm-hmm.
you would spend so much of your time putting your heart into these sort of impact forward big ideas. And yeah, some of them would happen and it'd be super rewarding. And then so many of them would get left in the room with a CMO who, frankly, wasn't always the nicest human in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, rewarding in so many ways, but also kind of soul crushing and inefficient. That I felt like I personally had this superpower that I loved, creativity, idea making, and then moving those ideas forward. And I didn't have full control of it. So there was that brewing for so long. And then, like you
Mm-hmm.
said, my heart is really what took me out of it. Like the
Mm-hmm.
money didn't matter anymore when I saw my parents lose their business, when COVID
Yeah.
hit. I had two babies at home. I had my second baby in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the pandemic, like with a mask on
Mm-hmm.
and my husband barely allowed in the room. And so, your whole perspective changes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, what do I need? And what will make me feel fulfilled? And I'll tell you that I make so much less than I made before. But I am so much more fulfilled. And honestly, like this sounds so cheesy, and I'm new into this credit union space, and so is my
Mm-hmm.
co-founder, who is,
Mm-hmm.
equally new into the space. We're 7 months into are these conversations and relationships, but it is so nice to be doing something that I feel passionate about, that I know is going to help people, and the people on the other side are good people.
Yeah.
I have not met a single person, a CEO at a credit union, someone working, downstream at a credit union,
Yeah.
at a fintech,
Yeah.
that aren't good people. And I can't always say the same about my previous job. Of course, at the agencies I worked with, but the
Sure.
companies, it's hit or miss. And I really value that. And I know you didn't ask for that long rambling answer, but
No,
I'm
it's okay.
passionate about it. And
Yeah.
it is kind of magical to find ourselves here where I'm like, okay, yeah, we're in B2B sales, but it isn't. There's a
Yeah.
real family here and really people trying to help other people, which is why we started Goodbye.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the type of people you want to partner with, right? You
Yeah.
want to find common ground. You want to build something. Tell me a little bit about your partnership model, right? How do you partner with credit unions? How do you partner with the local businesses as well, in order
Yeah,
to
great
build
question.
this network effect?
Yeah, great question. So I'll start on the business side and
Mm-hmm.
then move to the credit union side. And feel free to interject with questions if the picture isn't
Mm-hmm.
fully clear. But with the small business side, so when we built Goodbye Up, I mentioned those 1,500 businesses. We still have those businesses on the platform, and those businesses have agreed to sort of be the foundation of what we go to market with Goodbye. So many of those businesses are actually some pretty incredible, D2C businesses, some with brick and mortar that have incentives that they offer through Goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are what I would call the foundation. So imagine a, 3 billion AUM credit union comes to us and says, we want our own branded marketplace, want to customize it, and we want to get it out there pretty quickly. And so we use our foundation, they can take it or leave it, but those 1,500 businesses can be included.
Mm-hmm.
And those are sort of lowest priority. And then what we do is we go and we onboard for them on behalf of them, their existing businesses. So many of our partners that we're working with now and talk to have somewhere between 700 B2C businesses that fit our criteria, you know, that can be shown outwardly, and, 20,000.
Right.
And so we go out to them and we use our marketing skills and chops to onboard them for free. Do you want access to the member base? No problem. So we onboard them into Goodbye. So you've got the first layer of our existing businesses. You've got your layer of your existing businesses, and you're showing them, you're deepening that relationship. We're providing something really cool. And what they do in that onboarding is, it's really simple. They tell their story, they answer a few questions about their values, and then they upload their incentive. So it's super easy. It takes 4 minutes. We've done this for Goodbye for years. And then the third part, which is the most exciting and the most difficult, is that we have a suite of strategic sort of assets, marketing tools that we've essentially learned through Goodbye how to onboard businesses. And of course, a little bit of a learning curve with banking involved and with credit union sort of account creation involved. But then what we do is both the credit union, we empower them to use this as a carrot, as an incentive, as a way to bring on new small businesses and teach them through our assets, through our marketing tools. And then we also supplement that with our own acquisition because we know what we're doing. So we have all sorts of referral structures inside of the small business network that you wouldn't believe how easy it is to actually bring in a small business. And I can share more about that later. We've surveyed thousands of our businesses and spoken with hundreds about what would make them move over to a credit union. And it's actually quite simple to empower and enable this for them. So that is what we do. Does that make on that one side? I haven't answered your credit union side, but I'm curious.
No, that makes sense. My interest would be, do credit unions who have existing relationships with local businesses, do they have the ability to onboard their own existing members?
Yes, so that is the second piece I was talking about. So
perfect.
We do that for the credit union. However, if they've got that, we can give the marketing asset to them and they can onboard themselves. But what we've heard from the credit unions we're speaking with is, let us just give you their email addresses. You come on behalf of us, through our credit union, or we can even enact through their HubSpot or whatever tool they're using. And it's on behalf of the credit union. Right. Okay. They essentially onboard them. Yeah, that's the actually simplest way to volume. We can actually launch a credit union in a matter of weeks if they've got, even, you'd be shocked, but even 150 B2C businesses will make a very comprehensive marketplace.
Yeah. No, very cool. So how do you then find the credit unions you're going to partner with?
That's obviously, as any fintech founder knows, the question of the hour for everyone. Right. We've obviously begun building those relationships, and having those conversations. We're currently have a sort of pseudo signature with 3 credit unions all around the 1.5 billion AUM to 6.5 billion AUM. Okay. Sort of, that's the sweet spot tends to be there, though there's many credit unions who have a thoughtful small business offering that are smaller than that. However, for us in our journey where we're starting, this is the best place for us to get volume, get you up quickly and show you what we can do. Right. And so what we're doing is we're going to market just like any other fintech is, trying to tell our story and have folks on the other side who have this problem of we see the opportunity that small business account acquisition can bring, but we don't have that sophistication yet. We don't know how to do it. We need accelerant on what we have because, to be honest, these small business owners, when you come to them, and most of them aren't even being approached by credit unions, which everyone will laugh at that because it's true. But when they are approached, they don't care so much about the ACH transfer. Of course, the loans, yes. Yeah. But they don't care about these small differentiators. They don't like their banks. What they want their credit union to tell them is the story about how they help people in their community. That's all small businesses want. And then to show them with what Goodbye is doing by saying, and by doing this, we for free, if you move over a 10K balance or whatever we decide over to our credit union, I will open up our member base. And for the small business, it's honestly sometimes like they'll say, I would move over a 10K balance if it was just an email that they sent about a discount we offered during happy hour. Right. Just one email. let alone all that we're planning to do on
Yeah.
behalf of them.
Yeah.
So that is how we're sort of going to market, to talk to credit unions and to say to them, we've done this. We've done this on the consumer side. Let us do it for you under a white label, and let us sort of bring Main Street, North Carolina, right? Main Street online for you so that everyone wins. And that's kind of how we're going to market. But it is a little tough. I mean, transparently, there's a lot of credit unions who are very new to the small business space, even the bigger ones.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, we're just getting started, or we're trying to figure this out. And I am by no means telling you your entire product suite. I can't do that for you. We're coming in with this very specific incentive to help push you over the edge. And so that's why we're talking at this point with credit unions who have a bit of a foundation that we can help accelerate.
Are you interested in talking to community banks as well?
I think the answer long term is yes, but we're not focused there at all. I think regulatory speaking, it's a little bit trickier for our small team. And I think community banks makes a lot of sense. Obviously, we're dealing with like a region and a mission, and they tend to have a focus on small business, even more so than credit unions. But I think there's less of a problem there for them to solve. You know, credit unions this is a big problem right now. And I would say less than a problem, a huge opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Even more so.
Yeah.
What's the opportunity for the institution to do the integration? You've talked about white labeling. You've talked about apps. Like, what are you seeing that credit unions are interested in how they're integrating with your service?
That is actually the $1 million question. You know, we've heard over and over, every credit union we've spoken with has been like, is this easy? And don't BS me, because I've heard it all. How does this function? And so, you know, the fully transparent answer is I don't fully know yet, because we are in the process, you know, with implementation with 3 credit unions. And I want to say that out loud. But what I will say is we don't need banking information. We don't take any personally identifiable information. I don't need access to your bank account. We don't transact on behalf of the user. We are a facilitator. And so we have the benefit of avoiding and being able to avoid a lot beyond single sign-on. And so what we're talking with our credit unions now, it is my belief that we need very little integration at this current stage of where we're at. Currently, we're using an API, like authentication token, to at least, you know, essentially say that a user is a user of that credit union, whether they're a small business or not. And then we immediately say validated and give them access to the discounts and their unique QR code to download into their digital wallet so that they can go about their community and, you know, scan their access pass. So it is very simple, you know, relatively speaking. And then for the small business onboarding, we embed this in the end of their account process. So they're onboarding or they're existing. And so we do have lots of sort of things to learn in that process, but because of the simplicity of us being a facilitator between member base and, you know, small business, but not transacting on behalf, we're kind of a pass through. And then the beauty of that, you know, of course, the dream state is that we're single sign-on right away, though it's difficult to obviously do that without core banking integration. And Constellation might be a way to avoid that. A little plug for you. But we do, you know, we have thought a lot about how to make this something that, you know, a credit union can turn on really easily. And then we could eventually move into single sign-on. One really interesting note is that part of the benefit of Goodbye is that you want your entire community, whether they're a member of your credit union or not, to be able to access this marketplace, just not the discounts, because it becomes this massive marketing tool, right? To be able to not just say we support our community, but to be able to actually say, let's not just sponsor this event. You know, let's not just sponsor this event as a credit union. Let's show everybody. Let's show everybody the small business, our community, help them shop from them, and show them that if they're a member with us, that we empower that commerce and that transaction and tell those small business stories. So it becomes like a really powerful marketing tool.
Before you said that, I had this thought of, you know, maybe there's like a group of members who, by virtue of having a higher level checking account, get access to these discounts, kind of like a credit union prime model, right?
Yeah.
But I think the argument, the other side of that argument would be you're trying to maximize the community, you're trying to maximize the network effect. Don't put in artificial barriers in front of it,
Yeah.
right? Do you see credit unions approaching both of those, or they tend to go with just more of the all members will get access to it, at least in their thinking in these early
Yes.
stages?
Latter. So most
Okay.
of them think all members because the good people at credit
Yep.
unions, of course, thinking about giving that benefit. And also when you think about the drive to small business, they want to create volume in
Yes.
transaction, but also volume
Yeah.
to the benefit to that small business. That said, your very astute observation has come up a couple times with credit unions who maybe are not focused, who have found us and are really
Mhm.
excited about it, but are never going to be focused on small business due to a lot of their own charter and mission.
Sure.
And so they have said to us, hey, this would be a really interesting way. And it's not something we're doing right now, but they have said it'd be an interesting way to package up benefits in this
Yes.
sort of subscription mentality, for an individual member base. So not necessarily tiering it based on the kind of member, but offering it as a package,
Right.
to a member base saying, you get this pet insurance, you get, all these different components, and you get access to this community. That said, it is my feeling, when we think about equity and we think about, redistributing opportunity into the hands of, underrepresented small business owners and creating real impact that's reportable, against a credit union status, that data to me is just like open it up to everybody.
Yeah.
Of course, on the small business side, we can't do that because we need to suss for reputation. We
Right.
need to ensure that they fit, the bill, and that's part of our onboarding. So with small business side, we have to be a little bit more careful and hold certain standards there before they're onboarded. But on the member side, I think it's fairly open.
Mm-hmm. Are there particular success stories you like to share in regards to kind of the application of this solution in a community or for a particular vendor and what they've been able to see because of it?
I think transparently a very tricky question to answer on the fintech side.
Right.
So because we are not live with any of our partners right now. So we are taking a small strategic investment from our current partners that we're moving forward with, or hopefully going to be taking, a strategic investment. So I don't have exact case studies to show the effect, but we have modeled a lot of our, the potential success for a credit union, the potential impact in regards to our consumer side.
Yeah.
And taking sort of that conservative approach to what happens if we, let's say at bare minimum, based on a credit union's strategic growth initiatives around small business, they want to onboard for their entire credit union, looking at 10K balance merchant services, or traditional account. They want 320 small businesses this year. Like that's, not on the small side, but it's on the sort of mid side from what we've chatted with. And, we sort of took that and modeled it. And you can see pretty quickly with just a small, let's say we bring 200 of those, new credit unions on board, the kind of level of deposit growth, the retention and the growth inside of the actual small business community, the employee growth that you can kind of model inside of that, right? With every small business or multiple employees that are seeing this, you're building rapport with, and the benefit there, which is sort of hard to measure on an ROI. And then, estimating very conservatively on interchange income, in that first year with 200 businesses, you're looking at like $675K in, interchange income fees, which is super conservative. That's me assuming that one person makes one transaction every 3 months. So, and that's all under like a 2 billion AUM credit union. So we model this all the time for folks, but given our consumer experience, this starts to multiply, of course, as the credit union adopts it as well, because part of what we rely on is that the materials, the assets, the marketing that we do, that we create, that we do all of this for the credit union, that they enable it. Because if they don't enable some of it, or they choose to not promote it as much, it's not going to work as well for them.
That's right.
So that's sort of part of all of this.
So in your model, just to make sure we say it out loud, you're talking about one member making one charge at each of the signed up businesses every month.
No, one member making one purchase every month. We modeled our stuff pretty conservatively.
Oh, okay. And any of the vendors is what you're saying. Every member charges once a month at some vendor in the network,
right?
At some partner in the network.
That's very conservative because we all know, I mean, the utilization on these things can be
Yeah.
Sometimes it's dependent on how much you're marketing it. So there's two things we have to try to offset that.
Right.
One of which is part of the sort of branded marketplace experience, this beautiful directory. You can search by location, zip code, you can search by category, but if you never visit the directory more than once, it doesn't matter because you have a unique QR code you can download into your wallet, your digital wallet. And so once you do that, you can go anywhere and be like, do you take the discount? Because you're in your community. You just know to start building that. And that's what we're trying to build that muscle for is like, wallet share, using your financial institution card. And of course, the directory is beautiful and you can market it and it becomes this great tool, but they don't have to go back into it over and over again. It's not the credit union's job to sort of bake that in. And I forgot what the second piece was, but it will come to me at some point. At some point.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So talk to me about what are some of the early challenges you had to get through as you were making this pivot from consumer to working with institutions? What were some of the things you had to overcome?
That's loaded. But there were lots. I mean, lots. Carrie and I had this very interesting, that's my co-founder, very interesting moment where as founders, and I'm sure this will resonate, Kris, I think founders are only as good as their ability to let go of their latest, greatest idea. Right? Like, and I hate using this term, but I think the best founders, and I hope, to be one of them, are the ones that can sort of stop even through great press and exciting momentum and these things and see the forest through the trees and know when it's time to switch course or to let go of something that they said out loud was going to be their everything. Right? Was the thing that made them them. And I think it was a very exciting but very difficult transition for us. So Carrie and I had quite a bit of revenue coming in on the consumer side and excitement and growth. But when we launched Goodbye, it was a very particular time. It was right in the middle of the pandemic. The market was flush with investment. We raised in a matter of weeks. When we first launched Goodbye, we were in Fast Company, World Changing Ideas. We were an entrepreneur. We were everywhere. We had celebrities sharing what we were doing, and it all kind of got to us for some time. We felt like this was a thing, like we were going to take on Amazon, and it makes me laugh and chuckle now. We did have some pretty, substantial growth there, but even in the midst of all of that, when Russia invaded Ukraine and we ended up with a war on our hands that sort of reshaped our economic landscape, fundraising became interesting, the goalposts changed and we adapted. And what sort of happened was we started, modeling a lot of what we were working on. And I'm like, can we continue to build this business on this philosophy? But two, does this business model still work to both bring our business growth and create impact? We're a B Corp, like create impact for our small businesses, drive value. And, transparently, it's impossible in this day and age as a small business ourselves to go up against Amazon with their marketing dollars, to go up against, the fast fashions of the world, to just frankly market ourselves. There wasn't a way to really make it work. And for us, it was sort of getting people to Goodbye was the issue. Getting people to love Goodbye wasn't. Getting people to shop for them. And so for us, the pivot came in when we started to think about, we have something here. We've grown our small business base. Like, how do we find our people? And where do they exist already in that we can all benefit? The person, so it was sort of like this aggregation mentality of where are people that want to shop in their communities. And it sort of all started with that inbound, and this sort of started coming and eventually got us away. And the hardest thing, to answer your question, was letting go of the consumer revenue. Like, we needed to focus because we're so small. And so being like, I'm going to turn off our social, which has 40,000 followers. I'm going to turn off, like, let's let people who love Goodbye shop from us, but I am not going to spend an ounce on marketing because our people are credit unions and it feels right. And so that has been the hardest part of the journey, was being like, just sort of letting go and being okay with these moments of what you think are failure, but that aren't, if that makes sense.
Yeah. There's a moment where you see the world differently than when you started. And you have to be, it would be foolish to ignore that. In fact,
Exactly.
it is the strength of the entrepreneur to be able to see that change in the environment, read it, and
Yeah.
pivot accordingly, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just staying in the one and the original track out of pride.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's something that is certainly hard for a lot of people to get past.
Well, and it's totally, I love the way you said that because it makes me think about that first mind shift that you have. Like, I didn't know I could get to that because I was so set on like solving the biggest world problem,
Yep.
And when I got to it, it's almost like a new neural circuitry because now when you ask these questions, I don't know that I have the answer every time. I know that I'm capable in these moments where we partner with our first credit union and we notice that something isn't working the way that we thought it would.
Right.
I know that I can adapt,
That's right.
listen, be curious, solve a problem, and move
Yep.
forward. And that's the thing that, like, that lesson that was kind of painful in that moment really taught me, I feel like.
Yeah. And credit unions will be a great partner for you because they will take the time to sit with you and help you understand what would provide them with the most benefit as a customer, right? And ultimately the value to their members, right? But they're wonderful about that. And a lot of people don't know that. How did you find the credit union? How did you find your first credit union to have a conversation with?
Okay.
Like, why did you start there?
Okay, I honestly don't remember if I'm being.
Or maybe that's where you ended. I don't know.
I don't remember how the credit union concept came up. I have some relationships with some folks in other fintech spaces, like more family relationships. And something happened where I think we just got to this understanding more deeply. I always knew what credit unions were about, but started talking because that inbound from the bank came in. And then we were kind of circling this sort of community bank, credit union. And I don't remember exactly the moment, but I will tell you, and I'll give him a shout out here. I was on many years ago when I was at my old job. I was on the board of an organization in Boise that helped find refugees, displaced refugees, jobs that were in their similar field from the country they came from when they moved here. And it was very near and dear to my heart. And I worked with that organization for a couple of years. And on that board with me, of course, was a C-suite level human from a credit union, a local credit union. And to me, I hadn't thought twice about it. I was friends with him for years and more acquaintances. I had met his family a couple times. Salt of the earth human. His name is Albert. And he is Albert Kang, if you're listening, like an incredible human. And when we started finding ourselves back into this space, I pulled together a sort of how I was viewing the problem that we could solve and was like, I need to talk to you. And it's literally about work, which I never thought would be the thing, and got together with him. And he immediately was like, this resonates. And I think you should talk with our team. And we're still talking with their team right now.
That's
and
great.
they've actually helped us adapt how we think about the problem and have, helped us sort of, Albert specifically has helped us get into a place where our adjusted sort of UVP makes the most sense. So that's been our journey, but I don't know what the tipping point was.
That's probably a pretty good start to it, though.
Yeah.
Right? You meet a really good human, and they become people you want to work with, right? In one way or another.
Yeah.
So talk to me about your relationships with credit unions now. You talked about that you're bringing you're going through some early phases with 3 of them. Are you looking for credit union investment? Are you looking to become a CUSO?
It's a really good question. We're in the process. So we have been approached. We're, hopefully by the time this launches, we will either have won or had a good reception to Nick Cuso's next big idea.
There you go.
So we are going to be on stage shortly here to talk more about Goodbye. So we're not in need of investment right now. Let me just clarify that.
Okay.
We obviously took in some funding for our consumer-facing startup and took in another small round right before this pivot. So we have plenty of runway, which I think is an exciting thing for credit unions to hear, investors to hear. That said, the excitement of what we're building, the uniqueness of what we're building has started a lot of conversations, both around partnerships, which we can talk about, and around investment. So the few credit unions that we're speaking with now that I sort of hinted to earlier, I can't disclose who those are, but they're also wonderful humans and organizations. They have sort of asked if we'd be open to a small strategic investment. We're still learning the ropes of how, CUSOs and credit unions work and, deploying into a CUSO. So we're figuring out all those logistics about, forming Goodbye as a QSO and so forth to be able to take on some small investments. So we have those 3 partners and a couple others interested. We weren't looking to take it on, but we are doing it to help accelerate our relationships and our growth. So on that side, that's where we're at. And of course, new money will help us extend that runway and show more case studies that you're asking about and be able to sort of build up that referral structure, that we're looking for so that we can prove ourselves in this time.
That's awesome. If somebody wants to find out more about Goodbye, how do they research you? How do they reach out to you?
That's a great question. And because our team is so small, they should reach out to me. So they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. They can email me. It's just CARA@trygoodbye.com. And that's GOODBUY.com. They can obviously learn more on our website. And we have a white paper. I'm not sure if you've read it, Kris, ahead of this call or anything, but it's wonderful. It talks a lot about the small business opportunity. Should a credit union be starting to think about what that looks like for them? I'm always happy to chat and talk about this, even in a less salesy environment. So, if folks want to ping me on LinkedIn, send me an email, again, read our white paper on our site, and then watch things like this. What you're doing, Kris, is so great. Help,
I appreciate that.
Uplift, fintechs in the space, big and small, and have other people understand what we're trying to do to impact, credit unions and their members. I think it's important work. So I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I think the understanding who's out there, great entrepreneurs like you who are out there creating real solutions, I think is part of what our goal is. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing what you're doing. I'm super excited about it. I think credit unions and community banks, when the time is right, need to come talk to you about it.
I appreciate the plug, and I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, anytime we can talk about what we're most passionate about, excited about, our business, it is a good time for me.
Kara, thank you very much for being on the show today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Kris.
Anytime. Thanks again to Kara for joining us today. Please, everybody, go take a look at their wonderful startup, Goodbye. Thank you for coming by today and listening to this episode or watching us on YouTube. If you like it, please like and subscribe on your platform of choice. We will see you next time.